Gotta keep moving, gotta keep moving, gotta keep moving, gotta keep moving.
Welcome back to Cyprus and my walk and talk with Elina, a proud Cypriot with a deep love and understanding for Cyprus and its people on both sides of the Green Line, the border and buffer zone that divides the island. She's got a ton of stories, and one of the things that we're going to talk about is when she was 4, the Turkish army invaded and her family only had 5 minutes to pack and leave their homes on the coast of northern Cyprus, never to return.
I can clearly hear today that knock on the door, where it was our neighbors who knocked on the door and they said, "You have 5 minutes to pack. We need to leave and we're going together."
Varosha is now a ghost town, having been abandoned for 50 years. She also has a story about the Pope when he was here a few years ago.
And there was a very interesting case of 3 guys who were from Cameroon, and they were trying to escape from the north to the south, but they made a mistake. They didn't realize that they were climbing into a buffer zone, and the United Nations came there. So what they did is they escorted them back to the customs, the checkpoint there, and the customs said, no, we don't want them. They shouldn't have been here in the first place.
My name is Palabo, and this is the Radio Vagabond. We're back in Cyprus.
This is the Radio Vagabond.
Before we start, let me remind you that this episode is supported in part by hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best deals on hotel rooms, guest houses, and hostels all over the world. Just go to hotels25.com and make a simple search. We're starting inside the buffer zone, heading towards the border control and entering the Republic of Cyprus, the Greek Cypriotic side.
The buffer zone, where the walls whisper in a hushed tone. Side by side through the ghost town sights, the Radio Vagabond.
As we're walking through the buffer zone, there are some wonderful fruit trees right in front of these abandoned buildings with broken windows and graffiti.
You can never starve in Cyprus. It's very difficult to starve because there are orange trees and there are mandarin trees and lemon trees all over, and people actually encourage you to pick them up. I don't think I ever bought lemons. First of all, I'm a huge fan of lemons, so I use a lot of lemons in my cooking and squeezing everywhere and my water in the morning. And so my neighbors around where I live, they see me and they're, "Oh, Lenny," and they encourage me to pick lemons and oranges and mandarins because they don't want to lose. I mean, they fall so people actually encourage you to pick up their lemons from the trees because we have them everywhere. And now we are getting close to the Greek checkpoint. So you crossed over the Turkish and now we are going to the Greek. But because we are on a buffer zone, you do need to check in, but you don't need to show your passport unless they ask you to.
Okay.
However, if we were, you will actually, because you came from the Turkish, so you're going to have to actually show your passport again. However, because I only stayed on the buffer zone and I didn't cross over, I don't need to show my passport. And also because they know me. I'm joking. They're having their break.
You are coming from the occupied area?
Yeah.
Let me just pause here. Did you notice that? The lady in the Greek Cypriot border control calls it the occupied area, not northern Cyprus.
You are coming from the occupied area?
Yeah. Εγώ here lah.
Μόνο κύριο, εσείς που ήσασταν εδώ?
Ναι, περπατούσα να μέσα.
Είσαι η ξεναγός? Ναι, τώρα θυμάμαι. I need also the safe pass. Okay, danke.
Thank you. Now, this area here is still considered a very sensitive area. Although you have the Greek embassy there, here on the left, right by the custom, in a way, it's still buffer zone. We are moving slightly away, but it is still a kind of undeclared or not sure certain area. So a lot of the people who were living in this area actually are not interested in coming back because they don't want to be reminded of a past, and also they don't want to have their house right by the customs, right by, and also there's some legality with regards to property being too close to the buffer zone.
Yeah. So this is kind of a buffer zone to the buffer zone.
There we go, exactly, a buffer to the buffer zone.
Before we continue, I can see that many new listeners are joining the Vagabond family, so I thought I'd give you a chance to get to know a bit about who I am. so I'm setting a timer for 48 seconds. In other words, it's time for my new segment, Me, Me, Me.
Let's talk about me.
I'm originally a graphic designer, but very soon I found my passion in radio. I did my first radio show in January 1985. I've been a morning host, I've been a sales manager, I've been a station manager. I had 3 years where it was a full-time job for me to do telephone pranks on the radio. I did my first podcast in 2006, and then in 2007 I started my own company that I call Radio Guru, and I actually won national awards for Best Radio Commercial of the Year in Denmark 6 times. I also wrote a book about how to write and produce radio commercials and was a finalist at the Cannes Lions. But now it's all podcasting. Apart from my own podcast, I produce podcasts for the Lego Group since 2018, and I also produce and co-host another travel podcast called Travel Matters. I'll continue next week.
And now, let's get back to the show.
By the way, let me know if you have anything you want me to talk about. Send your questions and topics to question@theradiovagabond.com. I'm ready to share anything, so give it your best shot.
This is the Radio Vagabond Podcast.
As we get to the Greek side, we pass the parking lot where my rental car is parked. And we meet Mr. Bambos, who's the head of the people looking after the cars.
And this is Mr. Bambos that you probably met, who's regarding, who like to, now that we'll say hello to him, so he makes sure your car is safe there. Kalimera! Περπατούμε! Έχω τον κύριον εδώ, this is Mr. Bambos. Mr. Bambos, αφήγε το αυτοκίνητο γιατί μένει στην άλλη πλευρά.
Πότε το βάλε?
He's asking when you put the car on...
It was Saturday.
Saturday.
Το πλήρωσε νομίζω,
Ναι.
Okay.
He's gonna make sure it's... You have no windows when you come back.
Yeah, exactly. I saw that.
Let's see. So these are all my friends here, because when I'm waiting for guests to come, I usually hang out with these people, and they're interesting people. They are mostly taxi drivers, and you learn a lot from the insides and outsides. And plus, you meet a lot of Turkish Cypriots who are crossing, and they're coming for. So I love hanging out there, and that's Haris. Hello, Hari. Naxi. Ωραία, μια χαρά. And I also feel protected by them because they're always making sure that I'm safe and okay, Okay, and να σας δω μετά. Bye.
How is your Turkish?
Well, not so good. I actually signed up 100 times to learn at the Home of Cooperation because they have lessons there, but each time it was either of course these are excuses usually, but I actually the courses are in the evening, a lot of them, and for me evenings were hard to commit. But I have gone in there numerous times. I bought dictionaries. My desk is full of dictionaries and books on learning Turkish. So I try to self-teach myself. It's impossible, but I'm gonna get there because communication. I don't need to learn perfect Turkish, but I'd love to communicate more because in my job, especially, I meet a lot of Turkish Cypriot people and Turkish, and it makes a difference when you can speak the language. So
Duolingo.
Exactly, but I speak too many languages already and I confuse them, so...
Well, Turkish might be difficult for Elena, but obviously she's an expert in Greek. So let's just go through the basics.
And now,
The Radio Vagabond Language School.
Today, Greek. Hello.
Γεια σου.
Hello.
Γεια σου.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ.
Good morning.
Καλημέρα.
Good morning.
Καλημέρα.
Good evening.
Καλησπέρα.
Good evening.
Καλησπέρα.
Good night.
Καληνύχτα.
Good night.
Καληνύχτα.
Goodbye.
Αντίο.
Goodbye.
Αντίο.
To hell with it.
Εσέξιξη.
To hell with it.
Εσέξιξη.
It's all Greek to me.
Είναι όλα στα ελληνικά για μένα.
and that was
The Radio Vagabond Language School.
Today, Greek.
So here I wanted to show you the house. Remember what you said, buffer within buffer. So again, seeing this house, part of it actually is on the buffer zone, actually. It doesn't look like it is, okay? It is a divided house. It is one of those divided houses. And it's like, don't ask questions. You can't have it back because it is divided. So we're going to see this division as we walk. So this is one of the reasons that people could not actually restore or do anything with their house. Plus other reasons, meaning they're too close to the green line. It's a sensitive area. And plus it's going to cost a lot of money to restore. And so basically what you see is a skeleton of this house. And if we look right opposite, you can see that gorgeous house there. That was in a bit of a better state because it did have a roof. But actually it's been restored just a few months ago. And it was abandoned here for many years. So a beautiful house and an example of how other houses could be. And we're going to see a few on the row here, which again are colonial style. And a lot of these, as I said, over the years have been abandoned. And now people are coming back because, I mean, come on, 50 years later almost, nothing's really happened. So people are feeling more comfortable moving back into this area. Again, most of these houses are actually all of the houses here are actually owned by Greek Cypriots, but we'll also see some that are owned by Turkish Cypriots. And you always have to look at two sides of the story because we were refugees, the Greek Cypriots, but so were the Turkish Cypriots. They abandoned their houses too. And I'll show you later on a very good example of an older man who's living in a Turkish Cypriot house, and he can see his house but he can't live there, and he's actually so we're going to see that on our walk today.
During my walk and talk with Elina, we started talking about the city of Varosha on the eastern coast of northern Cyprus. That's where she and her family lived when she was just a little girl. Now it's like a snapshot frozen in time from 1974. Back then it was the place to be. Think bustling streets, swanky hotels, and beaches packed with tourists soaking up the sun. It was basically the holiday hotspot of Cyprus, drawing in everyone from movie stars to regular people looking for a little luxury. But then, in 1974, things took a dramatic turn. After a coup attempt aiming at uniting Cyprus with Greece, Turkey invaded the north of the island, and everyone in Varosha ran for their lives. The Turkish army sealed off Varosha, and no one has been allowed back since. Well, not until a few years ago, but I'll get back to that. Imagine leaving your house or your apartment one day and never returning. Your coffee cup still on the table, and your book left open on the last page you read. Now, if you look for it on Google Maps, it's called Ghost Town Palm Beach. Even though Elina was only 4 years old when they had to flee, she still remembers.
Yeah, you know how your memory works. It works when something, especially when things are, extremely happy or maybe traumatic, and usually your memory works in funny ways. So I actually recall a lot of things from that time. We had just moved there. My father had just bought an apartment right on the seafront, and we had just moved there. And my mother hadn't even unpacked all the boxes were shipped in, and she didn't even unpack. And I clearly remember standing on those boxes, giggling. And actually, at one point, I remember standing in the kitchen and looking through the window on one of those boxes, and I could see all the ships coming in, which was the military, the Turkish Navy. And I said to my mom, "Mom, look outside." And I remember my mom, her horrified look. Just soon after, we heard the sirens, and I still remember that sound like it was today. And then they started bombarding the area that we were living in. And I can clearly hear today that knock on the door, where it was our neighbors who knocked on the door, and they said, "Magda," to my mother, "you have 5 minutes to pack. You need to leave. We need to leave, and we're going together." So my mom had 5 minutes to basically pack her whole life in 5 minutes, and everything was still in boxes. So all she did was grab some photographs, all the necessary documents, passports, things like that, and just overnight clothes for us. We really thought we're coming back. We didn't think that we thought maybe 1 or 2 days and we're back home, right? So we evacuated with our neighbors, and I still remember getting in the car with the neighbors, And I remember crying because they couldn't take my bicycle. It wouldn't fit in the car. And that was where I learned how to cycle without the wheels, the side wheels. And my mom kept saying, don't worry, your bicycle is safe and we're going to come back and get it. And we were still hoping that even within the refugee camp, that things would quiet down and we would be able to return home. But that was not the case, unfortunately.
It's now about 4 minutes past 6, and the first of the Turkish troops have landed in Cyprus. About 5 of these aircraft passed over in the last 5 minutes. They were guided in by jet fighters, and the very first paratroopers are now hitting Cyprus soil.
We also lost trace of my father. He had to go to the military as a medic because he was a medical doctor.
We're talking before cell phones, obviously.
Oh yeah, nothing, 74, so nothing. And I do, again, another strong memory was seeing my mother on the beachfront in front of the refugee camp, just watching into the sky, and hoping and seeing her face with, always sad, that look on her face I'll never forget. Because she also was Polish and she didn't speak Greek. Her English was limited, so it was very difficult. And also the fact that they separated us from our neighbors depending on the passports we held. And so she had nobody around her that she knew, and we were in very difficult conditions. We had limited food, and my sister and I also got very sick. We had a very high fever, and so for my mom it was even more stressful. My father did appear 5-6 days later. And by the time he arrived, both my sister and I were in a very bad state in our health-wise. We maybe would not have even made it. We were that bad. And unfortunately, they had a lack of antibiotics then. And we needed antibiotics. And there were opportunities to actually evacuate the island. The British were evacuating refugees to the UK. And my mom wanted to go. And it was a really hard decision because when my father did arrive, she said, look, Simon, the girls are not going to make it most probably if we don't do something about it. He was looking, of course, to get us antibiotics, but and she said, Simon, I want to leave. And my father said, okay, you go with the girls and I stay here. This is my country. I need to stay. And my mom said, no, I'm not dividing our family. It's either we all stay in Cyprus or we all leave. It's no in between. So my dad had to take the most difficult decision in his life. Stay in his country, risk losing his girls, or evacuate with the whole family. So eventually he decided to evacuate with us, and we all left the country. And we went to the UK.
So now Varosha is a ghost town. The once glamorous hotels are crumbling, nature's taken over the abandoned shops, and the beaches are eerily empty. Going into the houses is off limits, guarded by military, and stepping into Varosha is like walking into a movie set where everyone suddenly disappeared.
That whole area is a very interesting area to visit, but it is a difficult area for many people, especially people that have lived there, to go. Because sadly, today when you go there, it's almost like visiting a theme park or a movie film set. People are just walking around, hiring a bicycle and just walking around and looking at it like it's a film set. But actually, it's people's lives were there. They lived and had their children there. And this place has been closed for 47 years. So when the borders opened in 2003, unfortunately, that area of Varosha, it's called Varosha, it's within the Famagusta area, was actually closed. And it was one of our most beautiful resorts, known for most beautiful beaches, they called it the Golden Sand Beaches, and so it was not just a tourist resort, but it was very much a lot of the community was moving there and living by the coast. And this was kind of like like a negotiating card between the two sides. So they couldn't decide what to do, and years, 1 year led to another, and then 10, 20, 30, all these years it was closed. And finally, just 2 years ago, they decided to open that area. So this whole city fell asleep through time, and it's an incredible place to visit.
Despite being a relic, Varosha hasn't been forgotten. It's often brought up in talks about resolving Cyprus's ongoing conflict, but reopening it is a touchy subject that sparks a lot of debates. It stands as a reminder of what once was and what could have been, all wrapped up in an overgrown beach town that time forgot.
Seeing what's happening in Ukraine is a big reminder as well. All these emotions have been coming back again, and I can relate and I can feel what people are going through. And it's painful because it's bringing back all those memories again into the surface. Just when you thought, well, years and years have gone by and we've kind of closed that chapter. And for me, the closure of the chapter was going back to my house for the first time this past August. So the first time that I actually went back and actually saw my house was only last August. And I went for the first time. I had seen the house and it was very emotional because I do remember that apartment. I do remember how I used to play on the beach in the front.
As of recently, parts of Varosha has started to be opened to the public by the Turkish Cypriot authorities. And that's a major thing since it was sealed off since 1974. But the majority of the area is still under military control and is not accessible. The opening has been met with international criticism, especially from the Republic of Cyprus and the United Nations, who feel that the decision violates agreements and UN resolutions regarding the status of Varosha. Now it's possible to go to a small portion of the beachfront and some streets, but the core of the ghost town, where the abandoned buildings and overgrown avenues lie, is still off limits, and especially going inside the buildings.
I'll tell you what really came back to me was all the stories that my dad, all the storytelling came from my father. My father made sure that we always remember that place and the place that we grew up. And he was always telling us stories about our land, our place, our home. And so all that finally came into reality, and all those stories that I heard. And I knew every street corner through my father's stories, his beautiful narration, and that brought everything into reality. So when I went back, it was seeing everything in front of me just the way my father had described it. So if I didn't remember a lot of things, my father made sure that we did. And there was not a day or that he would not come back to Famagusta in many ways. Our house in America was called Engomi after his village. So, it was always there. So yes, I can relate. And then when I went back, I did kind of close the chapter, and I had taken my mother there when she had visited.
Because you were there not with your mother first, and then you said to your mother, we need to go.
And my mother lives abroad in the US, and she had visited for Christmas, so I said, okay, we need to do a family trip there. And so we went with my mother and my sister and my daughter, so it was the first time for everybody. And it was a very, very emotional journey going back there. And my mother had remembered when we were standing outside the apartment, she remembered the blinds. She wanted to close the blinds because it was very hot in July, and she wanted to keep the apartment cool, but she had only 5 minutes to pack and get all her things. So she was in a hurry, and by the time she only reached half level and we left, the shutters were left in the same way as she had left them in 1974. And when we visited, my mom remembered, and they were halfway drawn, and they remained like that. So
the boxes were probably still inside.
Probably
you weren't allowed to go inside.
No, and this is what makes it even harder, because you're not allowed to go inside. Nobody's allowed, and of course they use the excuse that it's not safe. And understandably it's not safe, but they don't want people yet because they have not decided yet what they're going to do. And there's still negotiations and discussions. So here you are, 47 years later, you finally can see your house, but you can't go inside. And you're thinking, I left that little box under, let's say, a certain area. Maybe it's still there. And my mother was remembering she had this painting from her grandmother, beautiful, from Poland. And she said, Eleni, what if that painting... She didn't want anything else. She wanted that painting. And so we had binoculars, and we were trying really hard to look into that building, but it was hard. We thought we saw something, but we're not sure if it was that, And she keeps asking now she's back in the US, and she says, Eleni, if you hear anything, maybe I can get that painting back. Maybe I can get that little thing that I left, It's not about the money or anything else. It's just those sentimental things that you want back, your family heritage and things like that. So, quite the experience, yeah.
I didn't go over there since I didn't have a car, but if you do, it's important to be aware of these restrictions and to respect the legal boundaries that are in place, as the area is still sensitive and a politically charged topic.
You always have to keep account that when you go there, it is not a film set and it is not a theme park. This is where people lived. And unfortunately now it seems like this is more, the people that are visiting there are going more to see a film location, And it is very, very emotional because you do remember things. It's really hard for people that live there, such as myself, to witness that.
So if you're planning a visit, it's best to stay informed about the current status and any changes in access rights to Varosha. As we heard, Elina took her mother there when parts of it opened a few years ago. But her father never got a chance to go.
My father passed away almost 10 years ago. But I'm very happy to say that he managed to go back, not to the Varosha area, because that was obviously just opened 2 years ago, but his village that he grew up in, which was called Engomi, which was near that area, from his childhood, that was open. So we all went there as a family when the borders just opened in 2003, and we had a whole journey there. And again, it was fascinating for us to go. It was just an amazing experience to go back because, again, through storytelling, we knew that village like it was like we lived there all our life, although we were very young children. And my father had told us a very funny story. He came from an extremely poor family where they didn't have much to eat or drink, but a very big family. He didn't even have shoes sometimes. He didn't have a uniform for school. Just borrowed from his siblings if he was lucky. But one day he did get a present from his father, and it was a ball. And it was because they used to make their own balls out of paper, out of newspapers. And that was their football in the village. But one day he got a football, which actually was a very small ball, looked like a tennis ball. And he was about 10, 11 years old and so proud to show all the boys in the village that he had a ball. And so all the boys in the village gathered and they were looking at that ball. And so my dad wanted to show off, so he kicked that ball up into the sky, went so high up that it landed somewhere, and he never found that ball. And his childhood, he only had that one-off kick, which was an amazing kick apparently. So that story always stayed in our minds. And so the first thing we did in 2003 when the borders opened, we went there as a family, and we were looking in the village to find my father's ball. We didn't find it, but...
You didn't. No. I thought that would be the end to the story, and then we found it.
I wish it was
the case. And his name was on it.
I wish that was the case. But one beautiful thing that came out of this whole story, so we were wondering, how is my father going to feel going back and seeing his village, and especially seeing a lot of the places destroyed or abandoned. There were a lot of abandoned houses. And churches, for example, the Orthodox churches were just completely left neglected. And the graveyards, which is really the saddest part, to see your family grave for the first time in ruins. And it really bothered, that part really affected my father. So we were a little concerned because he was very upset to see that completely abandoned and left, graveyards to rot. And so... every weekend, my father kept going back to his village, and a lot of the journeys were done with my mother or just by himself. And slowly, he started getting to know the local village people who were Turkish Cypriot and Turkish settlers as well. And he used to sit at the local cafe and play backgammon with them and have the Turkish coffee with them, and he befriended them. And before you know it, he made a fantastic agreement with them. He said, "Look, I'll make a deal with you," he said. I will offer my services as a medical doctor free to your wives and your girls, because he was an obstetrician gynecologist. So your children, your grandchildren, the girls who need a doctor can come to me in Nicosia and visit me for free, and I will deliver the babies, and I will do. In turn, though, you will work on the church and you will take care of the graveyards, and together we will do this cooperation. What do you think? They agreed, and this is what happened. So my father had an influx of the whole village visiting him, and at the same time he got all the young generation to go and fix the graveyards. And of course he supported them if they needed financial, but this was a deal. And he did that until the last day. His last trip, a week before he passed away, was to his village, and the village was in an amazing condition, a lot better than what he had found it in. And there was a huge improvement in the church and the graveyards, and he left peacefully, knowing that his village was taken care of. Yeah.
Walking the line, the buffer zone, where the walls whisper in a hushed tone. Side by side, through the ghost town sights, the radio vagabond and the guide Elina's insights.
I posted 2 interesting videos on the radiovagabond.com about this ghost town and about the Cyprus conflict in general from 2 of my favorite YouTubers, Johnny Harris and Yes Theory.
Today is the day. We are going inside the Varosha ghost town. With permission from the Turkish military and from the UN, we are going to be some of the first people to ever capture this ghost town, and definitely the first to ever drone it. So what you're about to see has never been seen before. We have to stay on the roads, no going inside any of the buildings. If we do, we get arrested. There's going to be someone from the press office and someone from the Turkish military escorting us at all times, and the whole place is rigged with cameras. Now, this area here, this was the only point when Cyprus was divided from 74 till 2003. This was the only point that people could see each other. So obviously they completely and utterly stopped all means of communication. So phone lines were cut, post was cut. Obviously we didn't have internet in those days. This was the only point people would stand just as they are standing right now, and this physically we could see each other. And I clearly remember when we came back to Cyprus, I was 10 years old, and I had come with my father because he had a lot of colleagues, Turkish Cypriot, and they actually met there. I don't know how they managed to meet with the communication, but I guess they found a way. And we actually stood there, and I remember seeing a whole family, and they were talking with my father, and for me it was just all very weird to see all this. And I remember one of the ladies having a little box prepared. She had prepared some cookies that my dad liked, and she took them and she tried to throw them over so we could pick them up, and they landed in the barbed wires. And that for me was a huge disappointment, and I told my father that I never want to come back here because I thought it was horrible just to see those cookies landing in barbed wires. And actually saying that, not many people were actually doing this because it was very painful. Painful to see people changing, not being able to physically hug them, and of course, how to meet them as well. I mean, you might see them once and say, hey, I'll see you in 2 weeks. It wasn't done that often, so you wouldn't see that many people. Still, you see people hanging there. Now, today, the sad story is that we'll see Turkish Cypriots there, but we also see a lot of Turkish settlers. Now, the Turkish settlers are not allowed to cross the border. They are not recognized, although they've been in Cyprus for almost 50 years. They are not allowed to cross over the border. So they are the only ones that stand here behind those barbed wires. They see a new Nicosia developing. They see people walking, everyday people, and they are not allowed to come here. They are not recognized. The only ones that recognize them officially is Turkey. But they came here illegally. They came in 74. But today, look at today. These people have been here again for almost 50 years, and we are talking one generation to another. We're talking third generation most probably. And when you ask them, where are you from? They'll tell you, I'm from Cyprus. I'm from Cyprus. They have grown lands. They have their children here, their families. They've made a life here. They have never, a lot of them have never even left Cyprus. This is something.
And they're still not allowed to come here on the south side?
No, they're not recognized. Yeah, this is a sad reality. And there's a great film that I highly recommend you see. It's called Smuggling Hendrix. I cannot recommend this film more because in a very humoristic way and also very realistic way, it gives you a perspective from all three sides, from the Turkish Cypriot, from the Greek Cypriot, and from the Turkish settler. And it's a very simple story about a dog escaping from the south going to the north.
Again, the movie Elena recommends is called Smuggling Hendrix, and it's a comedic film from 2018. The story is set right here in Nicosia and revolves around Yanis, a down-on-his-luck musician planning to leave Cyprus for a fresh start in the Netherlands. But his plans are hilariously disrupted when his dog, Hendrix, escapes and runs across the buffer zone and into the Turkish-controlled side of Cyprus.
And it's his journey of the owner of the dog who has to cross for the first time, and he doesn't want to cross over. But he's forced because his dog crosses like any animal can cross freely without a passport.
Desperate to retrieve his beloved pet, Yanis finds himself navigating the complex, often absurd realities of the division of Cyprus.
He was one of those people that didn't want to cross. There are a lot of people that don't want to cross, by the way, because they feel that they don't want to show, why in my own country do I need to show a passport to cross over? It's my country. Why do I need to prove my identity? This is Cyprus. Why do I need to do that? So there's a lot of people till today that actually refuse to cross because they say, I will not cross until Cyprus is reunited again.
As he tries to smuggle Hendrix back to the Greek side, he gets help from a motley crew, including a Turkish settler and a Greek Cypriot who has his own reasons for crossing the border. Throughout the film, the characters face a bunch of comedic situations that highlights the absurdity of the political and cultural barriers that divide the island. The movie uses humor to explore themes of belonging, identity, and the silliness of bureaucratic divisions, making it not only funny, but also a thoughtful commentary to the Cypriot geopolitical situation.
Smuggling Henriks. Smuggling Henriks. And it's in 3 languages. It's in Greek, in Turkish, and in English. But of course, you have subtitles.
I put a link to the trailer in the episode notes and posted the video as a part of the blog post. Go to theradiovagabond.com.
The Radio Vagabond. Gotta keep moving.
As we're walking, I notice some refugees with small tents against the wall of the buffer zone. I sit down on the ground with 2 of them. It's Efti and Abdul from Somalia. And I ask them why they're here.
Somalia is not safe and it's not have big problem Somalia. Then I am coming after 6 months ago. Then I want to new start life Cyprus. I am minor, all guy minor. Then I want to study school. I want to new start life. Yeah. I'm coming Bunara camp, not safety, not school, not nothing. Then that's the problem. I am homeless now. Yeah. You know, that's the problem, bro.
So you put on tent here. Are you applying for asylum here in Cyprus?
I'm waiting. 20 days I am waiting. Another shelter go. That's the problem. I want to far.
So what are you hoping will happen? Because you put up tents here and you're staying here. What are your hopes for the future?
I'm waiting a solution. Yeah. But for another camp, eat, sleep. Nothing, everything, football, education.
The life animal. Eating, sleeping, the same animal. You know animal?
Yeah.
Dog same. Eating, sleeping. Not future.
Yeah. Well, I really hope the best for you guys, and good luck with everything, and hope you find a solution.
The meeting with the Somalia guys and a picture of Pope Francis reminds Elina of a story.
When he came in December, his mission, he was traveling around different countries, mainly in the Middle East. He was taking migrants back with him. So in Cyprus now we have a lot of migrants, as you can see in this area, and what he was selecting very specific cases that really needed help, and I think he took about 12 migrants from Cyprus back with him to the Vatican City. There was a very interesting case, because a lot of the migrants actually come from the north into the south, because in the south we are EU, so that's another interesting thing. Half of Cyprus is EU and the other is not. And there was a very interesting case of 3 guys who were from Cameroon, and they were trying to they were trying to escape from the north to the south, but they made a little mistake. So they climbed down the Venetian walls in the buffer zone, but they made a mistake. They didn't realize that they were climbing into a buffer zone, right? They thought they were in South territory. So they climbed down and they were spotted by the United Nations. And the United Nations came there and they said, look, you're illegally here. So what they did is they escorted them back to the north, to the customs, the checkpoint there. And they said, look, they escaped, you need to take them back. And the customs said, no, we don't want them. They shouldn't have been here in the first place. And the UN said, but you need to. They said, no, you take responsibility. So the UN then escorted them to the south checkpoint and said, you need to take these people in. You know, they're here for an opportunity. And they said, no, they shouldn't have been here. They escaped from the north. The north should take a responsibility, the TRNC. So they didn't want to take responsibility. So the UN basically were stuck and they didn't know what to do. These were people. So what they did is, until they took a decision, because the 2 sides didn't want to take responsibility, they let them camp out where the home of cooperation, right behind. They set up tent for them and they were providing them, with basic needs. Until one day, one of them got extremely sick, and needed an ambulance to take him to the hospital. They called the ambulance from the north, from the TRNC. No ambulance arrived. They called from the south. Ambulance was not coming. They called again and they said, look, he's going to die. And eventually they did bring an ambulance, did come from the south side, picked the guy up. The other 2 stayed behind. He went to hospital. He recovered, I guess, and he escaped from the hospital. So he got lost. The other two stayed, and it was December, and the Pope had arrived, and he heard about this case, and he decided to take them in and take them to the Vatican City. The third one got very unlucky, unfortunately. He's somewhere now. So sadly, he didn't get taken for a new opportunity in the Vatican, but his two friends did. And you have stories like that here a lot, these type of stories.
Wow. But I'm thinking, if you want to escape from the north to the south, why go where there's so much control here? Why not go where I got lost and the border's just blocked by a few barrels?
The ones that know and they probably they'll figure it out. But a lot of these guys are desperate. They just want to get here, and they don't really have the time or means to, or even access to maps, or some don't even have a phone. So they just know this is the south, that's the north. This looks like an easy access. They thought the Venetian wall would be an easy access because they could slide down in the night and nobody would notice. Little did they know that they're sliding into a buffer zone controlled by the United Nations that have cameras all over the place, and they would be caught. They just made a mistake.
It was such a pleasure walking and talking with Elina. She had so many great stories, and we talked for hours and hours, so I could have made these episodes much longer. But that's all we have time for, and I hope that you found them both entertaining and maybe even a bit educational. If you liked what you heard, it would be great if you told a friend. It's kind of a win-win for both of us. I get a new listener, and you get a thank you for giving your friend a good tip. So I'm really serious, it's the best way of spreading the news about a podcast. Stay tuned in this episode to hear where we're going next on the journey next Tuesday. This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com, the website that helps you find the best deals on a place to stay and a flight to get there. Hotels25.com. Again, thank you to Elina from walktalkcyprus.com for taking the time to go on this walk with me. Find the links on where to find her in the episode notes and on the radiovagabond.com, where you can also see pictures and videos. On Saturday, I have a different and special Vagabond Shorts for you. It's one of those 10-minute episodes that you'll get both as a podcast and as a YouTube video. In that one, we're taking a look at the top 7 adrenaline-filled adventures in Asia. I've done a few of them myself, so if you want to see and hear me scream, look for the Vagabond Short on Saturday. And Flashback Friday this week is from when I visited cities in China with one of my kids, Hong Kong, Ningbo, Shanghai and Beijing, plus a forbidden city.
We will now be arriving at the end of this installment of the Radio Vagabond. The next stop will be North America.
My name is Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya.
Radio Vagabond.
Produced by RadioGuru.co.uk.